Today from the global lane, is Trump joking? Canada, America's 51st state?
The situation in Canada has declined to the point where many Canadians are asking, well, gee, why are we an independent country? What are the benefits of that?
Diabolical sabotage. Government officials subvert Donald Trump's presidential agenda.
This effort is at odds with the specific things that the American people, with a significant majority, repudiated in November.
California wildfire apocalypse. New Orleans terrorism. Tesla truck suicide and wars. Seeking God in troubling times to help overcome anxiety and depression in the new year.
There's great hope, and there's every reason to be optimistic, not pessimistic.
And the passing of Jimmy Carter. The nation pays tribute to the life of its 39th president. And it's all right here on the global lane. The Trump tariff effect. Justin Trudeau has resigned after serving 9 years as Canadian Prime Minister. Rifts within his party over how to respond to Donald Trump's threatened imposition of a 25% tariff on Canadian imports into the U.S. led to his downfall. Joining us with more is Canadian attorney Leighton Gray. He's host of the Gray Matters podcast. Leighton, it's good to talk with you again. So did Trudeau really have to step down? Was there that much dissent within the Liberal Party?
I think so. I think at this point in the 157-year history of his party, the Liberal Party, which sort of operates as our Democrat Party in Canada, they have their lowest level of popularity ever in that entire period. He's the least popular prime minister in the history of polling in our country, and it's for a variety of reasons. He really has underperformed. People like me early on were shocked that somebody of his caliber could become the leader of our country, and sadly, he hasn't disappointed me in his ineptitude or his unethical conduct.
Well, the deputy prime minister stepped down just before Christmas, so what are the chances that she'll take his place before the upcoming national election in Canada?
I think that's her design, but by way of analogy, that would be like Kamala Harris taking over for Joe Biden. It would be a solution without a cure, and so that would not be at all good for Canada. I think that she is going to be one of the people who plans to take over the reins, but I think without doubt, our next prime minister within a very short time is going to be Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada.
And that'll probably take place before October?
We're hopeful. The election is supposed to take place by October at the latest. However, most pundits are predicting that we're going to have a spring national election in Canada, and I certainly hope that we will. I think we need it. We need to clear out these Liberals just as badly as Americans needed to clear out the Democrats.
So, Leighton, what do you expect Canada will do then to avoid these tariffs that Trump has threatened?
Well, this is interesting because I happen to think that the approach that's being taken by Trump and the MAGA movement, if I can call it that, United States, is much deeper than just the tariffs. I see the tariffs as sort of a boots-on-the-ground manifestation of a deeper plan. I had the privilege of attending a Trump rally in Henderson, Nevada, right before the election. And it dawned on me that MAGA is something much more than a political movement. I see it as a Made in America response to globalism. And I think that it's catching fire throughout the world. If you saw the way the people in as far away as Japan and Serbia and Hungary and of course right here in Canada reacted to Trump's victory, I think you can see that the tide is turning against globalism, against the idea that we need to destroy 7/8 of the Earth's population, destroy all of our energy, and drive most people in the middle class into abject poverty. I think these are ideas that are being roundly rejected, especially in the West. And I think that these tariffs are really the least of Canada's problems. I think that the message that Mr. Trump wants to send to Canada and other close trading partners is, look, you need to get on board with the movement. And which is MAGA, and it's much more and it's much deeper than just economic policy in my respectful view.
Well, I must point out that Canada is the #2 trading partner of the U.S., right behind Mexico and ahead of China. So
Yes.
Donald Trump now calls Justin Trudeau governor. He suggested that Canada become America's 51st state. Is that all in jest or a serious consideration?
Well, it certainly is something that has been in consideration in America for a very long time, going all the way back to the founding fathers. In fact, there always has been a contingency plan about expanding the United States into Canada. It hasn't made sense over the past century or so. I think that the two world wars kind of forestalled that, and then we got into the Cold War with the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc. But in the aftermath of that, I would say over the past 30 years, since Mr. Reagan left, I think that the situation in Canada has declined to the point where many Canadians are asking, well, gee, why are we an independent country? What are the benefits of that? Our standard of living used to mirror pretty closely the United States, but now even the richest parts of Canada would be behind states like Mississippi in terms of GDP and standard of living. And so I think that this is a time when it behooves us as people and indeed our leaders to look at all options, look at all possibilities, to do what's best for the citizenry and not necessarily for those who happen to have the privilege of governing us.
Well, Leighton, I don't need to tell you. I mean, Canadian provinces are split, very diverse. If you look at the Maritimes, Quebec, which over the years has had a secessionist movement, and the western states are all very different. So I don't see joining the U.S. as something that would happen to you.
It's a serious question. It certainly could, under certain circumstances. We could also have a situation where certain provinces which are more quote unquote American in the way that they behave and the way they govern themselves, for example, Alberta and Saskatchewan, who have very close political and economic ties to the U.S., they might want to join or at least have a very close association, almost borderless in nature. Borderless in a good way, not borderless in terms of not paying attention to the border, but borderless in terms of not having tariffs and having free trade, which benefits all parties. So these are things that I think need to be looked at closely. The question of Canadian sovereignty is one that has dogged us from the very outset. And this gets into a deeper discussion of Canada, what Canada is all about. But what Canada lacks as a nation is a sort of a uniting event. And America has a couple of really big ones. There's that revolution. And of course, there's the Civil War, which arguably was a second revolution. These are uniting points that really speak to Americans in terms of who they are and what they stand for and what their culture, what their country are all about. Canada has not really had those types of seminal events historically. And so there's always been a serious question in Canada in terms of uniting the country under guiding principles.
Okay, we'll see where all of this heads. Leighton Gray, attorney, host of the Gray Matters podcast. Thank you for joining us from Canada. We appreciate it.
It's been my great pleasure. Thank you.
Diabolical sabotage. Less than 2 weeks before Donald Trump's inauguration, are key Democrat loyalists in the U.S. government actively working to subvert the 47th president's domestic and foreign policy agenda? Our next guest believes they are and are thwarting the will of the majority of Americans. Frank Gaffney is president of the Institute for the American Future and former Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. Frank, it's always good to talk with you. So, sabotaging the efforts of an incoming president, why do you believe this is more than politics as usual when a president of an opposing party takes office?
Well, for one thing, the extent to which it's taking place is, I think, unprecedented. For another, the malevolent purpose is extraordinary. And thirdly, it fits a pattern, Gary. I think what we've been subjected to here for, well, at least since the 2016 campaign has been an expropriation of power through any means possible, including, I think, electoral theft and fraud and, sabotage. In that 2020 election specifically, But it goes back to before then with the efforts to, take down Donald Trump personally, politically, in terms of his presidency as well as his businesses. But it's with a vengeance now. And the point that you touched on there, I think, is so important. What makes it, well, absolutely not just anti-democratic, is that this effort is at odds with the specific things that the American people, with a significant majority, repudiated in November. Specific things like, I don't know, Ukraine policy, the indictments and prosecution of January 6th personnel, the handling of the pandemic, the energy insecurity that's been fostered, the foreign policy of the Biden-Harris administration, and of course, the deep state. And all of these are things that are being exacerbated during this transition period, so that when you harken back to that meeting that Trump and Biden had shortly after the election in November, and Biden solemnly committed to, on his own part, but also on that of his administration, to effect a peaceful transfer of power. Sure doesn't look like that. In fact, I was arguing with some friends earlier today, very much steeped as I am in how the Chinese Communist Party rolls. We've been witnessing a kind of unrestricted warfare, as the Chinese would put it, against Donald Trump, short of the shooting phase. And the question is that in the offing now?
Well, in a recent radio commentary, you contend we're not learning the full truth about the New Orleans terror attack. So what more do we need to know?
Well, I think what's not been adequately described is the connection between this perpetrator of the attack, a guy who pledged his loyalty to ISIS, yes, but the extent to which he is, I think, an example of someone who has been a participant in, as presumably benefited from, the Muslim Brotherhood apparatus in the United States, specifically the masjid or the mosque in Houston, from which he hailed. This is a full-on, I call them Sharia supremacist operation of the Muslim Brotherhood, one of many in our country. Anytime you see an Islamic society of this or an Islamic center of that, whether it's Washington, D.C. or Houston or otherwise, that's a Muslim Brotherhood brand. A terrorist organization, other than the fact that it has been designated as such, that's what it is, that's what it does, and that's what it will be doing more of, if this guy's example is any guide.
So you think he was radicalized there at that mosque, possibly?
100%. I mean, I don't know his life history. It may have been that he was radicalized on deployment, for all I know. But he incubated, for sure, in that mosque in Houston. And it's one of those places that has been kind of at the forefront of the Islamic movement in the United States. And that is not being really talked about at all, let alone amplified as I think it should be. Because the danger is we're looking at large numbers of jihadists. Not all of them are Muslim Brotherhood, but some we brought in legally when Afghanistan was surrendered. 70 to 100,000, mostly, as far as I can tell, Taliban. They're here, and then you've got Iranians, you've got Hezbollah, you've got Hamas cells. This is a massive problem, and the American people are not being told the truth about it. And unfortunately, there's blame to go around here on both sides of the aisle.
Well, I wish we had more time, Frank, but we're out of time. Thank you. You're president of the Institute for the American Future. We appreciate you sharing your time and insights.
I am pleasure being with you. Thank you.
Wildfires rage out of control in Southern California. A New York judge criminally sentences an incoming president 10 days before his inauguration. An ISIS terrorist brings death and carnage to New Orleans. A highly decorated Green Beret commits suicide in a fiery explosion in Las Vegas, claiming the nation is terminally ill, accusing its leaders of enriching themselves at the people's expense. War continues to rage in Ukraine and the Middle East, and all of these events are disturbing. But there is hope for 2025 and beyond. Joining us to share his thoughts is youth, religion, and culture expert Alex McFarland. Alex, first let's address Green Beret Matthew Livelsberger's suicide note. He said the nation is terminally ill. And I must point out that I know that you and I believe suicide's never a solution to our problems. But was Livelsberger right about the state of the nation?
Well, our nation does have problems. I don't think the illness is terminal if we, as a nation, will, all citizens, return to our founding principles, but especially God's people, Christians of every strata, if we will pray for this country. And so many verses we could cite, but 2 Chronicles 7:14, humble ourselves, turn from sin, pray and seek God. He has promised to hear from heaven, forgive our sin, and heal our land. So it is tragic. There is a hopelessness and an anxiety, and the many that are leftist, they've peddled just this negative message that America is bad, we should not be patriotic. And this is sad because there are tangible consequences. When people get into a position of hopelessness, as this person did, there are dire consequences. But there is hope. And we serve a God who is very merciful. We serve a God who is willing to forgive and even restore. And so there's great hope, and there's every reason to be optimistic, not pessimistic.
Well, many Americans remain hopeful for the future because of a second Trump presidency. And still, there are millions who did not vote for him, many who feel anger, despair about it. What do you tell them?
Well, I would, obviously, our primary message to all people is that the meaning and purpose of life is to have a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. But for the people that are angry or despondent over the outcome of the November 5th election, I would say, well, just keep an open mind. And when your grocery prices go down, when your stock portfolios go up, when wars around the world subside, when hostages from the Hamas attack of October 23 are released. Donald Trump, say what you will, this is a man that delivered on his promises first term. He's been delivering on the promises of a second term since even months before taking office. I got to say, so many people are less concerned about the spiritual and moral issues, and they're concerned about the money in their pocket. Give it a little while, and the benefits of a second Trump presidency will be hard to overlook.
And although Americans on both sides of the political divide are talking about cooperation, national unity, divisions still remain, and demonic forces are still at work hoping to destroy the country. So you believe it's a crucial time for people to pray. Why and what should they pray?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because Satan is real. Satan hates America for a couple of reasons. One, for 2 centuries, America has been at the forefront of the Great Commission. America has taken the gospel around the world and in the spirit of Matthew 25, given a cup of cold water in his name. And I've traveled throughout the world, and benefit and relief and benevolent work is virtually wherever you find it in the world. It's a 90% chance it'll be carried out by American Christian organizations. Satan hates that. But another reason that we've been the recipient of demonic oppression is because of our friendship with Israel. And Genesis 12 and elsewhere, God promised Abraham, I'll bless them that bless thee. And so America has been a friend to Israel. President Trump has been a great friend to Israel. And that is the greatest favor any president could do the American people, is to be a strong ally with the nation of Israel. and he is that. So I think we've got great days ahead.
Thank you, Alex, for setting us straight today. We appreciate it.
God bless you, my friend.
This week, the nation bid farewell to its oldest living president, Jimmy Carter, who passed away just after Christmas at the age of 100. I wanted to share some personal thoughts about our 39th president. I first covered candidate Carter in 1976 during a campaign stop in Michigan. He seemed to come out of nowhere. Few people outside of Georgia knew about him. He was a fresh and friendly face with a huge infectious smile. His greatest achievement was negotiating the Camp David Accords between Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin. I doubt the Abraham Accords negotiated by Donald Trump would have happened if President Carter had not brokered peace between Egypt and Israel. Both agreements were historic. In April 1980, President Carter ordered attempted rescue of the 52 Americans who were taken hostage in Iran. The mission failed when a U.S. military helicopter collided with a C-130 aircraft at Desert One, resulting in the deaths of 8 U.S. servicemen. At that time, I told a news industry colleague that Carter's chances of winning a second presidential term ended that day, along with the lives of the brave airmen and Marines. 6 months later, I had the privilege of conducting a live interview with President Carter, just 1 week before the election. For the first time, he revealed to me, a young local reporter working at WJRT-TV in Flint, Michigan, that his administration was using the Moroccan government as an intermediary to negotiate the hostage release with Iran. I will always be grateful for that moment and will remember Jimmy Carter as an unpretentious, kind, caring, and humble man who lived out his Christian faith, both during his presidency and in his post-presidential years. Here's what Carter told Pat Robertson before he won the White House in 1976.
My faith in Christ has grown with age and with responsibility.
Long after he left the White House, people often lined up outside Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia, to attend Carter's Sunday school class.
Let them know what Christ means to you.
When I first met President Carter, he told me to call him Jimmy. So we will miss your Christian example, Jimmy. I'm confident Jesus and Rosalind greeted you in heaven with "Well done, good and faithful servant." Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Until next time, be blessed.